The debate about whether to use scales or arpeggios to solo with rages on. Now, I happen to think it's a total chicken and egg situation, and I want to share with you today how these two things can come together in your practice. And keep it simple against one chord. Now you can grab the tab and notation over at my website, check the description for a link to that. You'll also find a link to my Patreon page, which brings me to say thank you to all my patrons for making videos like today possible. Now let's get on to 10 minutes with scales and arpeggios. I said we were going to try and do that in 10 minutes. We might not get through it in 10 minutes. Let's just see how we go. So I've got a backing track I'm about to press play on. It's available on my Patreon page, lowest tier. Now this is a 1-chord backing track, just a D minor 7. That's a good way to practice with this kind of thing. So here we go. Got the PDF here as well, which you can download from my website. First off, we've got a D minor 7 going on. That means, what's the arpeggio of that? The arpeggio of that would be, D, F, A, C, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. Now, we're first going to look at how you can build an idea around an arpeggio, but bring in scale notes for colour tones as I like to call them. We need a scale to help us do that away from that arpeggio, or to combine with that arpeggio. Now the most natural choice for this D minor 7 chord would be the Dorian scale, the second mode of the major scale. So that's D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Root, 2nd, or the 9th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Got the root on the top. Now, the way I like to think about a scale is divide it up into 2 camps, and that's primary and secondary. Primary being the 1, 3, 5, the minor triad. The really strong notes. D, F, A. 1, 3, 5. And then away from that, we've got those remaining notes, the secondary notes, which are, you can already hear they're more interesting sounding. E the 2nd or 9th, G the 4th, B the 6th, and then C the 7th. So these notes can add tension and interest to our lines. When you're getting used to arpeggios though, just before you do anything, I think it's important that we can play the arpeggio up and down, like 1, 3, 5, 7, 7, 5, 3, 1. And then, learn to vary the order. So like the ones I've got 4 written here, 1, 2. Start on the 7th, next one starts on the 5th. Next one starts on the 3rd. And the last one starts on the root. Reminds me of something. Alright, so that's just varying the order of, 1 through 5 plus a 7th, and that's, a good thing to practice if you've not got round to doing that yet. If you've only played your arpeggios in order, think about 1, 3, 5, 7, or just 1, 3, 5, the different ways you can jumble that up. What we're going to then do is add in some colour notes. So, let me just make this full screen. The colour notes, we're going to add in the 2nd first off. So, there it is on its own against it. Think about how you describe that sound. It's quite intense. I like it. I like the sound of it. Here it is in the 2nd bar. 1, 2. So finishing on that colour tone. Quite tense. Second idea. Got the 2nd in there a couple times, just to say add a bit of interest. And the final idea. Again in there a couple times, just varying the order of things, and that 2nd just adds some interest. You can just play around with, here's my 1, 3, 5 to the 2nd, like, or 1, 2, 3, 5. could find stuff in other octaves too. Moving on to the fourth, the G. A lot of people say don't play a fourth, just avoid it. And I think it's crazy because it adds interest and tension. It needs to go somewhere. It needs to go up to the fifth or down to the third. But there's other things we can do with it too. Let's try and put it in some lines. First one I've got, just looking at the screen, goes. So it's going fourth, third, root, third, fourth, fifth. Second one. So, oops. Do that slower. You can change the rhythm if it's easier. Maybe I made my a bit too quick. So this is the fourth to the seventh, back to the fourth, pull off to the third, then 1, 3, 5. Last idea on the fourth. Again, it adds interest beyond that 1, 3, 5. Nice sort of mixing, combining the secondary and the primary notes, if you like, or the colour tones, as I like to call them. What about the sixth? Sounds like this is a B. I love the sound of that. That screams the Dorian scale to me. And the first idea I've got. Slower. I should have said I've made the colour tones coloured in the tablet notation, sorry. Again there, the 1, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 6, finishing on it. The second idea. 6 to the 7th and back, to the 5th, to the root, to the 3rd. And then let's try combining a couple of these things. Here you go, this next idea's got the 2nd and the 4th in it. And the last one here, adding the 2nd, 4th and 6th. So you can see, hopefully here, that it's all spelling out some ideas for D minor. Once I brought in those colour tones, I don't know, the arpeggio notes maybe stand out because they sound stronger and more in against the chord. So that's the way I like to think about how I combine an arpeggio with a scale. So I think of those arpeggio notes as being really important notes. They're, you know, if it was a sentence, they're the verbs or the subject of it. And these secondary notes that I bring in, these colour tones, the other bits which may be like adjectives or adverbs, I don't know, they come together to create something more meaningful, something that makes sense, something that's interesting. And moving on, how do we combine, say, I said arpeggios with scales, we've just combined scales with arpeggios. The way I like to think about this is more, I've got my scale, and I think of my arpeggios as like chords that I could use within the scale. So if we harmonise the Dorian scale, which was, if we harmonise that into, say, just triads to start with, we'd have D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major back to D minor. Some sound better than others right there. Like, there's G to F, C to D minor, E minor to D minor. Anyway, because there's sounds from both from that scale, they will sound good against it. I like to think of this, I call it a chord or arpeggio trigger, if you like. So let's say we're playing the D Dorian scale. If I landed on an E, say, that could trigger an E minor chord. So I might be playing the Dorian, and then I go into E minor. Or the F note might trigger the F major. The G might trigger G major. And in these next ideas I'm going to show you that's exactly what happens. So the first one, I'm going to use the E minor triad, go into the D minor triad. So let's let me play it. It's nice having that texture with that E minor there. But in the next one, so what's happening in this one is we're going F, G, A, C, then this is an E minor, that triplet, then G, F at the end. And I suppose I see any of the notes of that chord, that arpeggio if you like, as potential triggers. Like the B here could trigger the arpeggio, you know, running up. So if I just run up Dorian, so when I got to B I went into the E minor triad. That's how I think of them, as things I can spring off into other chords from other sounds. Let's trigger the F chord, relative major of D minor. That's the first idea. Sorry. So it's going root, second, and then I trigger the F. There's an F triad. The second one. Sorry, the timing. There it is. So it's going the 7th to the 6th, and then I go F major triad, D root 3rd. There it is. Then, like if I was running up the scale, I can go D, E, then I land on an F, F, A, C. That's the triad. You know, to see that as an option to go off from that chord, that note, sorry, into the chord. Let's trigger G, the G triad or G chord. So there, this is just going up the scale. When I get to the 5th, skip to the 7th, then down a G triad. That's the trigger. Here you go, like that sounds nice. Sounds nicer than my idea actually. Just going a G triad to F the 3rd, to the 2nd. A second idea uses the G triad again, and then I've got a couple to finish, which is using, instead of just using E minor, we could add the 7th to that, so it becomes E minor 7. Or, and then we could go up. So it's going root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, then E minor 7. So up the scale by 4 notes, and then E minor 7. That was it backwards, so just trying to do that too. And then maybe another one might be nice, would be F major 7. I love that sound. And then down the scale, 7, 6, 5, 4, F major 7. So let me just pause the backing track. So what I was thinking of there really was this idea, two different ideas, which is I either think about, I've got the arpeggio or say a triad, and I can bring in other scale notes just for colour, otherwise things do get a bit dull. And they create interest and maybe some movement in our lines too, or dissonance and tension. And then the other way, flipping it the other way, just thinking about, well, what about how can we play from a scale-based perspective, but still bring in our arpeggios and chords. And that's how I like to do it. I think of a scale, and then any of the notes in that scale, I could potentially use the arpeggio off that note as a way to create some interest. Again, movement. You get that, chords built in 30 strong lines, but also like playing F major 7 or E minor 7 over a D minor chord wouldn't necessarily be everyone's first go-to thing. The first go-to thing would be D minor 7. So you get these other sounds, these superimposed sounds, which creates interest. I think some of my lines could have come out better. They're kind of just, written just to illustrate it. I think playing more organically is a nicer way to sort of do it. But, by all means, sort of explore them and give them a go and see if you can do some for yourself. As ever, let me know if you've got any questions. The backing track that I was using is available on the lowest tier of my Patreon page. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, you take care.